So about a year and a half ago, I shot a video comparing depth of field between smartphones, point-and-shoot cameras, and DSLRs. The verdict? Our phones could handily compete with point-and-shoot cameras, but not with DSLRs. Yet every time a new phone comes out, especially one where the company is hyping the camera, we see another rush of hack comparisons between phones and DSLRs. Seriously, stop it, tech bloggers. To spoil the results of this video, if you think the output from phones compares to proper cameras, you're not showing us how much better phone cameras have gotten, you're showing us how little you know about your DSLR. It pains me to do this, but let's reinforce this with evidence. Comparing the LG G4, my current favorite smartphone camera, against my Samsung NX30, which is technically not a DSLR as it's a mirrorless camera, but uses the same size APS-C sensor as most Canon and Nikon consumer DSLRs. You've all heard me harp on about this before. The sensor size difference between these two cameras is extreme. Since the G4 has a fixed wide-angle lens, I'm leaving my Samsung zoom lenses at home, and the closest lens I have, which approximates the G4's field of view, is my 16mm f2.4 Pancake Prime. This should also help illustrate that aperture alone isn't what's important, as this is technically a slower aperture than the f1.8 on the G4. The only editing going on is cropping the NX30 shots to match the 16:9 aspect ratio of the G4. And I'll note in the upper left-hand side if this is a RAW or a JPEG pic directly from each camera. So, these two photos of this tiny little flower look pretty similar, right? Good color, nice contrast, background details are starting to blur nicely. It would seem the G4 has caught the DSLR here, right? Wrong. The NX30 is shooting at an aperture of f13. That's right. At this distance from the subject, under the same lighting conditions, the sensor size advantage of the Samsung means we have to stop down to f13 to match a similar view as f1.8 on the G4. You want another? Here's the G4 at ground level. This is a very nicely exposed shot, and the background is soft, helping you keep your eye on the pine cone. There's nothing wrong with this shot. It's good. But here's what a similar setup will look like on a DSLR at f2.4. The background completely washes out. Soft-edged bokeh balls break through the leaves, and look at how narrow that plane of focus is running through the pine cone. There's maybe 2 centimeters of clearance on either side of the subject before the shallow depth of field kicks in. We can keep duplicating these results. Here's the G4. Here's the NX30 at f5.6. And now at f2.4. Again, the LG G4. NX30 at f8, and now the NX30 at f2.4. Sure, if we're shooting a dull landscape, then some of those DSLR advantages are minimized as we focus farther out, and then we get into a debate on JPEG rendering, but any shot where you can isolate your subject and put even a little distance between your subject and the background will be a clear victory for the larger sensor camera. You know, it's those photographic and cinematic elements which make for a good photo beyond just resolution, saturation, and white balance. Lastly, the smaller sensor will be taxed far more in low light situations. Cranking the G4 up to its peak ISO of 2700, we get a pretty noisy mess looking at the RAW file. Trying to match the exposure as closely as I could at a similar ISO, the NX30 at f5.6 and at ISO 2500 returns a much nicer image. Running these through JPEG processing, you can see easily how much more destructive the noise reduction needs to be on the G4 than on the APS-C camera. And I'm not impressed by the argument, well, most people won't use their cameras this way, or, but most people aren't pro photographers, or some other similar nonsense. If your big goal in owning a DSLR is to shoot full auto in green box mode and never learn anything about your camera, its settings, or composition, sure, you can save yourself some cash and likely get similar looking shots out of a premier smartphone. But even just learning how to control your aperture and leaving everything else full auto will return shots you cannot achieve on a phone camera without investing in lens attachments, which also buggers the whole "most people keep it simple" argument. Please repeat after me. With most other conditions being similar, the camera with the larger image sensor will win. Can we put this one to bed, folks? I mean, seriously, I love the G4 camera. It's fantastic. And minus a hardware zoom, it absolutely competes against little point-and-shoot cameras. But this phone versus interchangeable lens camera comparison is just click bait. It's a dumb retread topic we trot out every phone generation, and it only takes a little tech common sense to instantly see that it's a poor way to compare optics and photo output. As always, folks, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more nerdcore cranky rants like these, and I would not be able to continue whining on this channel if you all weren't out there sharing these comparisons on sites like Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, and the Googles+, so please keep bringing more cool people to the party. Hit that thumbs up button, and I will catch you all on the next video.